With that, I want to call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 120 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Indigenous and Northern Affairs. As always, I want to recognize by acknowledging that we are gathered on the ancestral and unceded territories of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe peoples, and to express gratitude that we're able to do the important work of this committee on lands they've stewarded since time immemorial. We do have a witness that's just joining shortly here, having some tech issues, but I wanted to make sure we got started so we don't waste any more time. And pursuant to the order of reference of Wednesday, June 5th, 2024, the committee is resuming consideration of Bill C-61, an act respecting water, source water, drinking water, wastewater, and related infrastructure on First Nations lands. I want to welcome our witnesses that are both here today in person and by video conference joining us in person. Welcome Dr. Josh Reimer, President of the Canadian Medical Association. From the Water Movement, we have Candice Cook, Dion Hassler, Bida Malekian, and Desmond Mitchell, all joining by video conference. And very shortly, we will have Mr. James Hotchkiss from the Ontario Society of Professional Engineers. So we'll start off by having 5 minutes for introductory remarks for each of the witnesses, and we'll start with Dr. Reimer. The floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Dr. Josh Reimer. As President of the Canadian Medical Association, the CMA, I'm grateful for this opportunity to speak about the direct link of water and health. As a public health physician, I was trained in the topic of water quality and am very familiar with the various factors that can make water unsafe. Le Canada abrite une grande partie des restes.
Canada holds much of the world's fresh water. It is our responsibility to protect this critical resource for future generations. The CMA is committed to working in partnership and reciprocity with Indigenous peoples to advance reconciliation in healthcare.
Health is intrinsically linked to health of the land and water. Without protecting remaining clean water sources, we risk environmental damage and loss of life. Water insecurity is a matter of life and death for many Indigenous communities. In addition to the infectious risks of unsafe water, long-term drinking water advisories have been linked to higher suicide rates in First Nations communities, exposing the lethal costs of inaction. Water is life is a truth that must guide us to protect Indigenous rights and the sacred resource. It's a plea for action. To protect these communities, to ensure that everyone thrives and not just survives. We look to the government to invest in health priorities identified by Indigenous organizations to achieve measurable, ongoing improvements in health and wellness. We must listen to the voices of Indigenous communities, calling for careful reconsideration of its provisions to ensure self-determined maintenance of essential drinking water and wastewater infrastructure. The CMA supports the amendments raised by Chiefs and First Nations, specifically acknowledging access to drinking water as a fundamental human right, and we urge the swift passage of Bill C-61. Chair, the CMA has long believed that health is a basic human right. Ensuring safe and sufficient drinking water is essential to better health and wellness. We rarely learn about the toxicity of source water in medical school, but those who work in Indigenous communities see the impact firsthand. As a public health physician, I myself have issued many temporary boil water advisories in my career. Seeing the disruption that a short-term advisory can have on the daily lives of community members and businesses makes it all the more striking to consider that this is a daily reality for many Indigenous communities. Everyone in Canada, including those who live in remote and Indigenous communities, should have the same confidence in the quality of their water supply as those who are living here in Ottawa. And it is not lost on me that we are here in this space with clear, clean drinking water in front of us today. We want families, no matter where they live, to be able to fill their glasses with potable water free from toxins. Everyone should be able to cook with water that enriches their health and not endangers it. They should be without fear of exposure to harmful contaminants. And who shouldn't be able to teach their children that water is a source of life and not a potential hazard? Representing the Physicians of Canada, the CMA strives to build sustainable healthcare systems inclusive of Indigenous knowledge. We call on governments to prioritize and invest in policies that address the determinants of health, including the historical and ongoing impacts of colonization, income, education, employment, food security, and indeed safe water. Addressing water security and climate resilience is also key to closing the health disparities between Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities. Protecting water security goes hand in hand with confronting climate change. It's a crisis that strikes Indigenous communities hardest and threatens their way of life. The factors that drive climate change and poor health are closely connected. Indigenous peoples face a dire lack of health services, particularly in remote communities, and they experience anti-Indigenous racism in our health systems. They experience a lack of cultural safety and a disregard for Indigenous health and healing models. In conclusion, Bill C-61 is a step towards ensuring clean water and better health outcomes for all. We support the legislation's commitment to establishing safe water infrastructure in, on, and under First Nations lands, in cooperation with First Nations, and in a way that is consistent with Canada's obligations to First Nations. Improving health outcomes for Indigenous peoples must start with Indigenous voices leading the way. So I thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much, Dr. Reimer. We're just going to have a very brief suspension here as we get one of our witnesses connected. We are just in the middle of doing the opening remarks, and I'll turn it over to you next. You have 5 minutes to deliver opening remarks.
Okay, sounds good. Well, as articulated in the UN Sustainable Development Goal 6, access to safe water, sanitation, and hygiene is the most basic human need for health and well-being. Now that we're 2 decades into the over 2 decades into the 21st century, it's completely unacceptable for any community in Canada to have inadequate access to safe and affordable drinking water or to safely manage sanitation. Um, Effective management and ready access to safe water supply and sanitation is essential not only to health, but also to poverty reduction, food security, peace and human rights, ecosystems, and education. Yet today, many First Nations communities across Canada have lived under long-term boil advisories for many decades. Um, this bill would recognize the First Nations stewardship over their own water resources and infrastructure and improve the potential to develop the most appropriate and effective infrastructure models and solutions for their communities. While Canada has well-developed infrastructure across the country, the models and solutions that have been successfully deployed in Toronto or Vancouver, even in small towns throughout Alberta or Quebec, may not be the best options for First Nations communities in northern Manitoba or even those along the St. Lawrence. In fact, as Canada tries to accommodate major population growth in peri-urban or rural communities, the infrastructure models developed in the early part of the 20th century may no longer be the most appropriate solution. Increasingly around the world, decentralized solutions that reflect the needs and capabilities of local communities are gaining traction. It's positive to see the responsibility for the management of resources and services being localized to First Nations communities. Local influence can enhance the adoption of the most appropriate solutions for that specific community, and also to accelerate the adoption of better and more advanced technologies and processes. Without question, as we try to embrace sustainability in a circular economy, decentralized solutions that reflect the unique nature of an application or community may offer the most effective options for managing this essential resource. However, Bill C-61 doesn't come without its complexities. The management of water resources poses significant transboundary issues, both on the quality of water entering the community from an external source and on the effluent that may leave the community and migrate to adjacent sites. A strong consultative framework will be required to navigate through these issues and to ensure that the health and safety of all Canadians are of paramount concern. Many existing water and wastewater regulations, standards, operating practices, and treatment processes have been developed over many decades and often from the perspective of larger centralized utility models. These may not be the most effective or appropriate options for small communities that are often remote. Solutions for many of these applications will have to recognize potential obstacles, from the lack of readily available expertise or spare parts to power supply issues and the need for location-specific training and maintenance resources. By encouraging the development of solutions that reflect and embrace the needs and interests of smaller, localized populations, such as First Nations communities, this approach could contribute significantly to the goals of sustainability and circularity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hotchkiss. Next up, we will be turning the microphone over to the water movement. I'm not sure who will be speaking on behalf of the water movement, but collectively you will have 5 minutes to deliver opening remarks.
I'll take this one on. I was hoping for some extra time because one of our colleagues couldn't speak today, so I think I can expand a little further to help the cause, if that's all right.
Sure, yeah, you have 5 minutes, and then there'll be opportunities for the members of the committee to ask questions in rounds afterwards.
Good morning, members of the committee. My name is Desmond Mitchell, and I am grateful for the opportunity to speak with you today. I'm a certified water operator with over 15 years of practical experience in working in and managing water utility systems. I've had the privilege of establishing a utilities department for Tsuut'ina Nation, focusing on capacity building and skill development within the community. Additionally, I collaborate with various organizations, including the Water Movement, NIWAC, National Indigenous Waters Advisory Committee, and TSEG, Technical Service Advisory Group. My work, along with others, has extended to a variety of First Nations water initiatives across Canada. Today, I am here to voice my concerns about Bill C-61 from an operational standpoint. I want to make one thing clear from the start. As someone who has worked at many levels of water systems operations, I am deeply concerned about the practical impact this bill will have, particularly for water operators and public works staff. Quite simply, the operational foundation in many First Nations communities is not yet ready. The reality is that many First Nations communities do not have the technical capacity to manage their water systems as this bill assumes. Through water movement, we have consistently demonstrated that there is a severe lack of support for water operators in First Nations communities. Many operators are working in under-resourced environments, often without access to ongoing training, mentorship, or tools they need to do their jobs effectively. Becoming a certified water operator is not something that happens overnight. It requires years of training, experience, and support. It also requires a fully functional system in place, a support network that includes public works staff, proper infrastructure, and access to professional development. Developing a capable and self-sufficient utility or public works department takes decades, especially when starting from a lower operational baseline. The biggest concern I have with Bill C-61 is the liability it places on First Nations, especially when so many communities are already struggling to retain dedicated and qualified operators. Water systems are complex, and they require not just skilled operators, but an entire public works team that is properly trained, well supported, and fully staffed. Without a qualified and stable team in place, this bill is essentially a disaster waiting to happen. When water systems fail, it's the community that suffers, not just in terms of health risks, but also in legal and financial consequences. By shifting responsibilities onto First Nations without ensuring the proper operational support is already in place, this bill risks creating situations where First Nations are held liable for system failures that they simply don't have the capacity to prevent or manage. I would also like to note that First Nations will be liable for systems that have been diminished by lack of funding in previous years. In its current form, the bill assumes that First Nations can meet these new responsibilities, but the reality is that many communities are not equipped to take on the added burden. If there aren't enough certified operators, or if the public works teams are stretched too thin, we'll see serious consequences. Infrastructure will fail, water quality could drop, and ultimately, it'll be the First Nation that faces the fallout, legal, financial, and operational. Simply put, without the proper support for retaining qualified operators and building robust public works teams, this bill is setting many communities up for failure. Another major concern is that the consultation process for this bill has largely overlooked the voices of those who are most affected, the water operators and public works staff who are responsible for the day-to-day management. We are the people who deal directly with the challenges of aging infrastructure, a lack of resources, and gaps in operational support. We are the ones who understand what it takes to run a water system because we do it every day. By not consulting directly with the water operators and public works teams, this bill overlooks the operational reality that many First Nations are not prepared to handle. I believe Bill C-61 needs to be reconsidered with a focus on operational foundation of First Nations water systems. The solution cannot be a top-down approach. It needs to start with the people on the ground, operators, public works staff, and the departments tasked with managing these critical systems. Before moving forward with strict timelines and standards, we need to focus on capacity building. My recommendations for this include the following. One,
so, Mr. Mitchell, I'm afraid we've elapsed the time here. There is going to be opportunities for the members to ask questions. So I hate to interrupt you here, but we do need to get on to the first round of questioning, and we can hold that thought for until the questions come up.
Would you like me to do the conclusion?
If you can wrap it up very quickly, because we're already over time here.
In closing, I want to emphasize that while Bill C-61 is well-intentioned, it overlooks the most critical element of water management, the people who operate the systems. Without proper support, training, and infrastructure, many First Nations simply won't be able to meet the standards set by this bill. We must address the foundational issues before imposing new regulations and guidelines.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Mitchell, and with that, we're going to start our first round of questioning, the 6-minute round, starting with Mr. Malillo from the Conservative Party.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And your job is sometimes a tough one, sometimes to keep us on schedule here, so thank you for that. But I want to thank all the witnesses for being here, and Mr. Mitchell, I believe you're about to go into a few recommendations. I'd like to give you the opportunity to share those recommendations with us.
Certainly, and thank you. My recommendations for this include the following. 1, investing in operator training and development, ensuring that every First Nations has access to qualified and certified operators. 2, providing ongoing support for retention and professional growth, because operators need not just initial training, but also long-term support to remain effective. 3, focusing on infrastructure improvements and maintenance, as many systems are operating with outdated or failing equipment. 4, engaging frontline workers in the conversation. We are the ones who know what it'll take to make these systems run.
For that, very much appreciated. And I wanted to ask you a lot of questions that I think you already touched on in your opening remarks, but just maybe dig into it a little bit more. Because some of the concerns we've heard throughout this process at committee and in meetings outside is that there's lots in this bill that is left to future regulation, and it's sort of the teeth and the follow-through is perhaps something that's still to be determined going forward. And I think that is the case when it comes to ensuring that there are water operators that are trained, that the systems are built to withstand conditions, all of those things. So you talked a bit about the process to become a trained operator. Could you go a bit further into detail with that? Is there a general timeline that takes? What are the complexities for that as well for someone living on a First Nation versus outside of a First Nation?
Oh man, this is my bread and butter. So there's 2 main paths that you can go to become an operator. One I call the School of Hard Knocks, and that's when you work with a First Nation or municipality for a year. After that year, myself as a manager, I can get you enrolled in courses, and we can start that path to write your certification exam. It's important to note that there are 4 disciplines, and within those 4 disciplines, they're different: water treatment, water distribution, wastewater collection, and wastewater treatment. A successful candidate, a real go-getter, can be a certified operator through the path of hard knocks in about a year and a half. I've never seen it done. It's closer to 2. Another path you can take is, I'm in Alberta, so I'm going to use Nate and Sade as examples. You go to school for a year, they put you in a placement, you come out, you write your exam, and then you get certified. Still takes about a year. This is difficult for remote communities. Even option 1 is difficult for remote communities. Many of the operators that I have brought up from Satena do better in a hands-on situation. And I even have my own personal beliefs that the School of Hard Knocks builds a better operator for a small system. So it's constant support, it's constant training, and it's constant mentorship. As a manager, I spend 2/3 of my time in the field teaching my young operators.
Thank you very much for that. Very much appreciated. You also mentioned in your remarks, if I heard you correctly, that the operators on First Nations, particularly in remote communities, are operating without access to appropriate resources. Can you, again, go into a bit more detail on what specific resources are available outside of a First Nation that are not available in that First Nation?
There's many. Some places are so far remote, so far up north, they have limited shovels to work with. If they break something as simple as a shovel or a pick, you know, it could take a week to get to them. That's think about that. That's mind-boggling. Some resources are financial. I'm very fortunate with Satana Nation. We're nestled right on the edge of Calgary. I'm a lucky one. If I break a part or if a piece of chemical injection tubing breaks, I have one of 10 contractors or businesses I could call up and say, hey, I'm sending an operator to grab these parts. That's not the case for many First Nations operators. Something as simple as chemical injection tubing or fittings can become a major obstacle. And it's not necessarily from a place of ill planning. It's more of an operator comes in on the weekend, he fixes a part here, we're good to go. We like to build these systems robust, so before the next replacement part can come in, the same part breaks on another piece of equipment. It's happened time and time again. So financial is one, resources are another, and just overall equipment.
Okay, thank you. I think I have time for maybe a very quick question, so I'll just stick with you, Mr. Mitchell. I really appreciate what you've been sharing so far. You also mentioned retention as one of your important recommendations. Has the government been putting any resources or appropriate resources at this point into retention? Could you describe what the current situation is in your view?
Yeah. TSAC does a really good job at building up operators. They do the best they can. A big problem for retention is within the communities themselves. I'm not sure if you're a small town boy. I am. Sometimes the politics within a small community that you're raised in affect you. Sometimes it's the wrong last name. Sometimes it's who you're related to. You get pushed out. I often refer to being an operator as we work in the shadows. We do not get pats on the backs. We really serve the community in a selfless manner until
Thank you,
something
Mr.
goes
Mitchell.
wrong.
I'm going to have to ask you to wrap. We're over time here again. Well, with that, we're going to move over to our second questioner here. Mr. Hanley, you have 6 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and thank you to all of the witnesses today. And Dr. Reimer, I'm going to focus my questions on with you. Thanks for your testimony. You and I are both public health physicians and have had experience issuing boil water advisories. And I wonder if you could talk about your experience issuing boil water advisories, particularly the effect on the community, the social effect. Maybe you can, describe some of your experiences there.
Sure. Thank you so much for the question. Issuing a boil water advisory is not a minor decision. It causes incredible stress on a community, on businesses as well, because it requires them to change everything about how they go about their daily lives, whether that's washing the dishes in a restaurant, to preparing food at home, to doing laundry. And so, it's quite striking when you see how a temporary boil water advisory can be so disruptive to think that this is the daily reality for so many people. And in fact, in many cases, when the contaminants are not microbial, so not infectious, a boil water advisory won't even address the concerns. It may in fact make it worse because you make the water more concentrated with whatever substance may be in it. And so this is something that we do in partnership with drinking water officers and indeed with operators. So we very much value the expertise of the operators who are on the ground. But it's something that can cause dramatic effects in that community on the businesses trying to run their business in the community. And so it's for that reason that we support the passage of this bill, but certainly do emphasize that within regulations it would be important to ensure that the real costs of not just implementing water treatment and wastewater treatment, but also the ongoing running of the infrastructure be included in discussions with First Nations.
Thank you. And can you also describe community readiness, when it comes to lifting boil water advisories, you would offer guidance usually in that area, but can you comment, apart from obviously the quality testing, but how else do you assess, or how else are you involved in community readiness to lift boil water advisories?
Thank you again. I think one of the very challenging, less measurable effects is the fear that comes along with a boil water advisory. And so while in order to lift a boil water advisory, there needs to be multiple testings showing the water is safe, it's very challenging for a community to trust that that water that they were just told is dangerous is now safe for consumption. And so we're very thankful to the operators, to the drinking water officers, to all of the folks who have developed materials that we can share with community members about how to function safely during and after a boil water advisory. But certainly that fear is not something that disappears immediately and can have lasting effects because those communities wonder if this same problem may occur again and whether their children are safe to drink the water on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you. That's very helpful. You clearly have familiarity as a public health physician in provincial legislation and working with with regulations and both as interpreting and helping to enforce regulations. How do you see the benefit of having this overarching federal legislation, Bill C-61, and you've urged us to pass this quickly? How do you see federal legislation as being helpful in ultimately enabling clean water in First Nation communities?
We must put an end to the environmental racism that we've seen for far too long in this country, and the experiences of many Indigenous peoples across the country are deeply unacceptable. And while there is no bill that is perfect, this is an important first step to acknowledging the rights of Indigenous peoples, the rights of First Nations peoples, particularly in concordance with the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, to ensure that they do have self-determination over the resources that affect them on a day-to-day basis. And so while there will undoubtedly need to be a lot of discussion and partnership with many different jurisdictions, we still believe in the CMA that this is a critical first step in recognizing those rights and helping move things forward in a positive way.
And thank you. I have a little bit of time left, but I was very interested that you brought up climate change and its relationship to health. I know as an organization, CMA has done a lot of recent work on the relationship between climate change and health. With your public health hat on, can you comment on the importance of recognizing and responding to climate change as it relates to source water protection and supporting maintenance of clean water?
Water truly is life, is needed for everything in our day-to-day basis. And when we see the many effects of climate change, whether it's changing weather patterns that are leading to more heat-related illness and death, or wildfires that cause both injury as well as respiratory conditions, and the stress that comes along with it, protecting water is another element of that. And we see, with the changes in what infectious diseases can survive in different parts of the world, we're seeing some of the shifts in what might be in the water. We see some invasive species that are taking hold in some parts. I live in Manitoba, where Lake Manitoba has invasive species that are living in the lake and causing harm to that water and making it unsafe to use for many things. And so this is something that is interlinked and affects the health of all of us.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hanley. Le prochain tour va aller à
Our next round will go to Mr. Lemire for 6 minutes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you to all our witnesses for your contributions and for spreading awareness on Indigenous realities. I think that your work is very beneficial for what we're doing here. It helps us to move forward and will help us with our clause by clause. Ms. Reimer, the Canadian Medical Association stated last week that they did a multi-year review of their archives related to Indigenous communities, and they found a long history of prejudice amongst Canadian physicians. Do you have access to data in federal hospitals? How do you access this data? Was it difficult to make your reports? And were you able to get information for all provinces? Thank you very much for the question.
We accessed in our review the data specific to the Canadian Medical Association, and so we did a multi-year review of our specific records. And the Canadian Medical Association does not run any health systems or health services directly. However, despite not doing that, we still found many incidents of prejudice and discrimination within our own records, whether they be how we promoted physician income over the wellness of Indigenous peoples, for example. These were things that were clear in our records. We are also currently going through the Canadian Medical Association journal to look at the research that has been published over the entirety of that journal's existence and expect those results to be ready in 2025. In addition, we met with many Indigenous community members and had a guiding circle made up of elders and knowledge keepers and Indigenous physicians who gave us a lot more information than what we could find in our records. For example, they expressed to us, despite it not being in our records, the role that physicians played in the 60s scoop, as well as the ongoing overrepresentation of child apprehension that occurs with Indigenous families. And so that was included in our apology as well as what we found directly in our records. We don't have access to the hospital records directly, but do have the records of how the association representing physicians communicated about and advocated, or rather, in many cases, didn't advocate on behalf of people who were experiencing harms in those hospitals.
C'est très intéressant parce qu'effectivement, je pense...
It's very interesting because I think one thing that's extremely difficult for Indigenous groups is to have proper access to services. You know that there have been missing and murdered Indigenous women, amongst other issues that relate to healthcare. And the issue here in many cases is accessing data. So thank you for sharing this information. Secondly, how do you manage ethical issues that are raised by some of these practices we have mentioned, for example, in the report that you mentioned, amongst other reports?
Well, one of the things that we did during our assessment was we used our code of ethics to guide some of the work that we did. However, we've also found that our code of ethics is insufficient when it comes to how it addresses racism and discrimination within the healthcare system. And that's one of the commitments in our action plan, is that we're going to open up our code of ethics and do a review of how we need to improve that code, because it's actually something that applies to all physicians in Canada, that they must abide by this code of ethics. And so one of our action items coming out of the apology is to strengthen the wording in that code of ethics so that all physicians are aware and are held to the standard that we should have been held to all along, protecting the health of Indigenous peoples.
Quels travaux ont été réalisés?
What work has been done or is ongoing potentially to look into the epigenetic effects of these circumstances on Indigenous communities?
That's a great question. The epigenetic effects were not specifically looked at in our review. That didn't appear in the documentation from the CMA. However, there is good research that these epigenetic effects do indeed occur and have long-lasting impacts on generations. And so I don't know the answer to this at this point, but I wonder if we may see some of that come up in the review from the Canadian Medical Association's journal. Because certainly there will be evidence, I can hope that maybe it won't come up because it's not an example of racism, but instead is a positive example of working in reconciliation. However, we don't yet know what we're going to find in that review.
J'aimerais qu'on puisse aller peut-être un peu.
You mentioned this, but I'd like to dig into it more. How could we formulate a tangible recommendation to take into account the epigenetic effects of the situation for public health, and taking into account that the fact that we need to prioritize in our funding the specific needs of Indigenous communities?
So epigenetic effects really refer to the impact that certain traumas can have on generations going forward, even if the specific harm is not ongoing. When it comes to First Nations communities, not only do we have historical trauma, but there is ongoing harms as well, and so both of those circumstances would be applying in this situation. I think it will be critical to have First Nations voices front and center in the consultation around the regulations, and making sure that their self-determination is consistent with the requirements of the UN DRIP, to make sure that those voices are heard and valued in the regulations and the decision-making about how costs should be assigned.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Lemire.
Thank you, Mr. Lemire.
We have joining the committee today, Ms. Blaney. You have 6 minutes.
Well, thank you, Chair. It's good to visit. I used to sit on this committee, so I always enjoy a little bit of time back to talk about these really important realities. So I'm going to start with you first, Dr. Reamer, through the Chair, of course. You mentioned in your testimony that you have issued boil water advisories in First Nations communities, and we know that prior to colonization, it's very clear from the history, that First Nations managed their water and had clean water, and it was a pretty good system that they had in place. So I'm just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the difference between what it is like to call a boil water advisory in a First Nations community compared perhaps to a community like mine. I think of Courtney, that's had a few boil water advisories.
Thank you so much for the question. The jurisdictional divide does make it complicated when we're issuing temporary boil water advisories. Often and it may differ from province to territory as well. I'll speak to in Manitoba, we have a public health physician who is on call 24/7 for the entire province. And so if a boil water advisory needs to be issued, say, on the weekend, regardless of where it occurs, it would be that individual who issues it. However, come Monday morning, we need to, if it's a First Nations community, we would need to work with the First Nations Inuit Health branch, or whatever it is titled at that time, to ensure that the ongoing work, the official issuance, occurs with them. And so that, consistent with some of the challenge we've seen with Jordan's principle, can add complexities when it's a provincial medical officer of health who's done the initial advisory, but it's on a First Nations community that is under federal jurisdiction.
So I hear you that it adds to the complexity, and that can make it a little more stressful. And I'm just wondering, in terms of making those announcements, in terms of the community's response, I'm just curious if there's a uniqueness or something that we should better understand about what that feels like for the community. I know in my riding, I'm in BC, I have a few very remote communities, and they have water systems that sometimes have huge challenges to them. And it can be very stressful for them because, as another person testified today, you don't necessarily have the remedies to fix it because you are so very remote, and that just brings up such fear. So I'm just wondering if you could talk about that impact on the community and the health and well-being, not only of their bodies, but maybe of their minds.
Yeah, thank you again for that question. The more remote a community, the more stressful something like a boil water advisory can be, precisely because of what the other witness mentioned, where it's lack of resources and the longer time it takes to find solutions and resources. And in particular, on average, First Nations communities have less access to resources, have lower income, and so may face additional challenges in those solutions, regardless of where they're located. Having never lived in a First Nations community, I would defer to the chiefs and other First Nations members who have spoken into this committee about their experiences. As a non-Indigenous physician, the challenges seem much higher when you have that lack of resources, as well as the jurisdictional challenges that they may face.
Thank you. I'm going to just go to Mr. Mitchell. I believe that's the name. I'm just curious. You talked about the remoteness and the challenge of building capacity in some of these small remote communities. And I guess my question is around resources, because what I've heard from some of the communities I represent is often the government will say something like, here's some money to fix those pipes. But if you want to train people to make sure that those pipes stay good, that's going to be another source of funding. Here might be some information, and the timing doesn't work. And so that ongoing work of building capacity and spreading the knowledge around the community a little bit more tends to be a challenge. So I'm just wondering if you could speak to that and if that's something that you've heard or experienced yourself.
That's a great question. Respectfully, I would like to defer this to Dion. I believe he may be in a better position to answer it.
Perfect. You, Dion. Your mic needs to be, your mic's not on. You have to unmute yourself. Thank you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, my name is Dion Hassler. I'm a First Nations circuit rider in Saskatchewan. I live in a First Nations community. I work with many First Nations communities, 11 communities here. I'm also a leader in the First Nations in different organizations. So, and speaking from across Canada, seeing all the different things and hearing all the different issues that we have across Canada, especially remote communities like yours is in BC. But remoteness, well, one of the big problems is access to training, access to parts. You know, we have like Manitoba there. You've got the ice roads, so you're cut off at certain times of the year. So this type of situation, we have like northern Saskatchewan where it's fly-in too. So they're getting our operators to training, getting them trained, trying to get them to do online training. Those are all the issues that we try and deliver, but it doesn't always work. So we're still looking for solutions and a better way to do it. With this bill, I don't really see it as supporting us because this bill is basically saying that we're passing on authority or jurisdiction to the province. So I don't see it really contributing to what our needs really are. I don't really see us getting more funding or more adequate funding for what we need to do in First Nation.
Mr. Hessler,
We've been struggling.
I'm afraid I hate to do this again, but we're over time here. I'm going to have to cut you off. If you just want to maybe quickly wrap up that thought.
Yeah, I was just going to say that it's not unique. We've been struggling with this. We're lack of education. We have First Nation operators that come into our water plants that have very little skills right out. Some of them not even completed high school, but in non-First Nations, they're taking a lot of their employees that are retired from other trades. So there's a difference. I've worked in non-First Nation communities. I'm a veteran, so I've served in the military. So I've seen both sides of this situation.
Thank you very much. That concludes our first round of questioning. We're just going to get 4 people in the next round here, starting with Mr. Schmale for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to our witnesses. I want to continue the line of questioning my colleague Eric Melillo and some around the table have been kind of diving into, especially around the potential solutions that exist, especially given the fact that I think we all agree that the technology is there to fix a lot of the drinking water problems, especially on reserve, but addressing some of the challenges that exist in remote communities. So I'm guessing this question continues with the water movement, but may even involve the professional engineer that's been on the call as well. In today's day and age, the technology exists. The challenges you mentioned about weather, remoteness, transportation, that's kind of been there for a long time. So what is the roadblock? Like, some of these challenges aren't new. Like, where is it? Why isn't, we've been able to fix a lot of things, right? Like, why hasn't anybody been able to fix it? I'm not blaming anyone. I just want to know, is it the department? Is it, municipalities, provinces not talking to each other? Like, where's the roadblock here?
I'll take this one. It's people. It's capacity building. It's unbelievably hard to build a successful team that has the knowledge and expertise to deal with this technology. There's some great stuff out there. I'm going to throw an example at you. Certain types of membrane filtration require a chemical cleaner. There's some plants that are far up remote north. They have these systems. They were put in place by whatever form of government in the day, and they didn't take into account the thousands of pounds that they have to air freight up. It's the people. It's the fact that you can't have a team full of one-sided expertise. You need a balance. And yeah, the technology is out there, but it's not as easy to work with as you may think. Some of this stuff is highly specialized. So again, remoteness plays a part. What if you're up north in Inuit or Nunavut and you need a technician to fly out? So part of it's funding, part of it's management, but majority is people, capacity building, and it's a team that keeps these systems running. It's not just an operator. I rely on a whole public works team to make sure that everything's running smooth. I've got a lagoon discharge next week. You want to bet I'm working with roads to clear the culverts? Simple things like that.
Move on to my next question. Does Mr. Hodgkins want to jump in?
Thank you. Yeah, I think part of the problem that I've seen, not just with Canada's First Nations communities, but elsewhere around the world, are the models that we have been using for both water and wastewater, particularly wastewater, basically date back to the early part of the 20th century. Our basic wastewater technology, which uses an activated sludge process, a bacterial process, was patented in 1913. It really hasn't changed very much since then, but technology has advanced. And we have the ability to embrace newer technologies. Mr. Mitchell mentioned membrane solutions. They've been around for roughly 5 decades now, but they've evolved. And the solutions that were implemented 20 years ago, 30 years ago, have been superseded by new innovations. I think part of the problem that I find in across Canada and in many other parts of the world is we have models that were developed decades ago, and we're still designing systems the way we did decades ago. We have engineering offices that are quite happy to continue to do the same things that they did years ago. And we have a mindset that we have one model, whether it's for water or wastewater, that fits all applications. And you can't take the technology that works in Regina and put it into a First Nations community that is 2,000 kilometers north of there. I think the other problem that we have related to being stuck in old thinking and old engineering practices is that we still continue to look at water and wastewater as 2 distinct issues. But basically, we find problems around the world where we don't have wastewater people and water people talking to each other. We look at them as 2 different concepts.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid I'm going to have to interrupt you there, Mr. Hoskins. Okay. Hate doing this, but we're going to have to move over to our next questioner, which will be Mr. Scarpalegia from the Liberal Party.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This, I think, is a fascinating panel. I think I've been sitting in on these meetings, and we've really gone to the heart of the issue, which is a technological issue, a management issue, a financing issue, and I see everyone on the panel here really having the answers. I mean, from Mr. Hotchkiss and Mr. Mitchell, you understand the operations of wastewater systems probably better than anyone else. So it seems like we have all the solutions. The question is, how do we build that capacity? How do we improve the management of wastewater, including from the point of view of designing systems and so on? So what's it going to take to move forward? Do we need some kind of catalyst? Obviously, Public Works working with Indigenous and Northern Affairs, working with Environment Canada, working with outside engineers, it hasn't solved the problem. We've had the best talent for years and years working on this issue, but somehow through lack of coordination or because of just of people working in silos, we haven't been able to. We've been installing plants, I hear, that never became operational, but were extremely expensive and top of the line. So, what's the catalyst? Is the catalyst the First Nations Water Commission that this bill will create, or is that going to solve the problem, or in your opinion, Mr. Mitchell, afterwards, Mr. Hotchkiss?
Thank you for the question. The reality is that we're not lucky enough to have a one fixed solution. There's many catalysts. Where pay equity is one. The lack of permanent consultation with the boots on the ground is another. Red tapes on funding is one. And there should be some form of water advisory committee that operators and managers like myself and other people on this panel can discuss with.
Can I add some comments there?
Yes, please.
I work with communities all over the world, basically from Singapore to New Zealand, and worked on projects all over the world. Canada used to have the #1 expertise in water and wastewater. We had the Wastewater Technology Center in Burlington. We had the Canada Center for Inland Waters. We've sort of lost that capability. I don't think we have the right type of dialogue going on between operators, between communities, across the engineering community. We're not training people appropriately. So I think we do need a mechanism within Canada that looks at what's happening around the world in terms of decentralized technologies, looking at minimum liquid discharge, zero liquid discharge for wastewater operations. Wastewater is 99.9% water with a small amount of contaminants in there. We have the technologies to deal with that now. We just have to look at what are the technologies that are most appropriate for communities that are not the size of Toronto with Ashbridges Bay wastewater plant, which is probably the worst example we could probably use, because you never should treat wastewater at the end of the pipe. You should treat it at the source. So that is changing the same way that we've moved from centralized power, centralized communications to decentralized systems. We need to look at that, bringing that into the water space. And we're starting to have a dialogue around that as we start to look at how do we manage 6.5 million new people coming into Ontario. We're not going to do it by using the same models that we used in the 1950s, 1960s, 1970s. We have to start looking at different models, look at what's happening in other parts of the world. I work with the US EPA, and they have a complete group that's working on remote operations, whether it's with Indigenous communities or or non-Indigenous communities in the middle of Arkansas or in the middle of Nebraska or in Alaska. So we need to get a community dialogue going in Canada, how to identify technologies that are appropriate for the community, for the people that live in that community, and for the problems they face in that community.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hotchkiss and Mr. Scarpalegia. I see Mr. Hasler has his hand up, but we're through the time for this round. Prochain, je vais donner la parole à Monsieur Le.
I will now give the floor to Mr. Lemire for 2.5 minutes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. My question will be for Mr. Hodgkin, or maybe for those from Water Movement. I'd like to raise a concern that we found on the ground. My assistant, that I appreciate so much for all of her contribution, has brought this to light to bring around the table today. So, in the north of Quebec, the SNC-Lavalin deals with the water treatment system. And they work with the Saint-Quentin company. And they signed a contract for 50 years with SNC-Lavalin. And if they, they're based in Montreal, about 20 hours of driving away. So if something breaks, it's very difficult to find a solution quickly, and that can mean that there could be several days that go by without the plant being able to run. So I'd like to hear more about training for operators on the ground, and how can we better support Indigenous communities to allow them to manage their budget themselves so that they're not taking orders from the provinces or dealing with a monopoly that's imposing things on them. How do we improve this system so that Indigenous people have more autonomy and that there's better collaboration and better knowledge keeping amongst Indigenous peoples?
I can take a stab at that if you like. We work with a lot of remote communities, not necessarily in Canada, but it could be a remote community in the middle of the Caribbean, which also has an issue when you try to find a spare part, a valve or something, they don't exist. We just started a system down there, and they don't even have the right type of valves to put on the system. I think a lot of it comes, to address your question, companies like SNC-Lavalin are fabulous engineering companies, but a lot of their expertise, particularly in the water engineering department, they're looking at systems from a large centralized utility model. And I don't care whether it's SNC-Lavalin or Jacobs Engineering or Veolia. Their expertise has really developed around large, capital-intensive projects.
Mr. Hotchkiss, I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up that thought quickly, if you could.
Okay, but I'll come back. I think we need to start looking at a different model, a decentralized model that gets away from the typical type of systems that we see in large communities. And that is part of the dialogue I was talking about, getting going with smaller communities. And it doesn't matter whether it's a First Nations community or a small community in the middle of Ontario. You need to have different models.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Lemire.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lemire.
Last round of questioning. It's my pleasure to turn the microphone over to Ms. Blaney for 2.5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Chair. And I want to spend some more time with Mr. Hasler. I really appreciated your response, and thank you for your service, sir. You let us know that you're a veteran, and I really appreciate your service to our country. But I do want to go back again to the building of capacity within Indigenous communities. We know that finding training in remote Indigenous communities can be a challenge, and we know that often the funds are not there to provide the resources required to have the training in a way that actually allows for a sharing of knowledge. And then, of course, one of the things that I've noticed in the community that I come from is that you do a training, you may train several people, but of course, those people aren't given an opportunity to keep doing the work, which means that they lose a lot of that knowledge, and then that cycle continues. So I'm just wondering if you could speak to what sort of needs are in Indigenous communities in terms of building that training capacity so that there is more people who know how to do the work and honoring that unique environment.
Oh, that's a great question, because it's something that I'm really dealing with right now. Is because with our operators at my age, I want to retire here pretty soon, but we got new operators coming into the field. A lot of our operators are underpaid and don't want to come into the field of the water because there again, it doesn't. There's no saying that you can live on this salary because a lot of our operators are getting minimum wage. And some of them, our operators are getting less than minimum wage to operate these plants. So what interest are they getting? What kind of people are we, is going to come into our and be a water plant operator and do the training? And also, there's other jobs that are getting paid better, like a security person. So, to me, we've been losing these people over years to mining security jobs. But, we just got to find a way to attract these people into the industry. I know with here in Saskatchewan, we've developed an association, and it's all First Nations led, grassroots. And this way we have more participants coming and even networking together and trying to find solutions within themselves. They feel more comfortable that they're all First Nations work together to find better solutions. But this bill also goes to the responsibility of engineering. We've experienced ever since I came in, a lot of our water plants aren't designed proper to treat some of the water that we've been going. So wrong designs for these water plants. Some of the engineering designs, who's responsible for that? Because we keep getting wrong designs, but we found some designs here in Saskatchewan that are unique that work for us because Saskatchewan has a different groundwater quality that other provinces don't really experience. So,
Mr. Hasser, if I could just get you to wrap up that thought, I'm afraid we are over time again.
Oh yes. Well, like I said, I think pay is one thing that we have to look for to support our operators. So that's, I think, is the most important thing we need to do.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Blaney, and certainly Mr. Hasser, thank you for your service and for all of the services that our witnesses are doing in communities right across the country. I thought it was really fascinating to learn a lot more about some of the operational challenges that are faced. I wish we had more time to do this. If there is anything that our witnesses weren't able to get to that they want to share with the committee, I do invite you to share that in writing, and that would be helpful as we move ahead with this legislation and go into clause-by-clause consideration. So please don't hesitate to share that if you have any other thoughts. But I just want to thank all of you for your testimony today and taking the time to do this. It's much appreciated. But with that, we will wrap the meeting. Is it the will of the committee to adjourn? Meeting adjourned.